Welcome to the Polite Conversations podcast, where every episode is focused on civility, decorum, and good manners. And I'm your lovable, non-controversial host, Ina. If you know me, you know I definitely don't like to ruffle any feathers at all. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 79. I've got the wonderful folks of Left Reckoning here today, David Griscom and Matt Leck. Of course, Matt Leck people will also know from Majority Report. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing very well. It's my day off, and there's nothing no better way to start it, I think, than talking to you two.
Aw. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I'm a big fan, and also, it was super fun chatting with you guys when I was on your show a couple months ago, so I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, people should check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll link it in the show notes. And, tell me more. How did Left Reckoning come about?
David, do you want to take that?
It's Matt and I have been working, together for a long time, and after, on the Michael Brooks show,
right.
And after Michael's passing, Matt and I wanted to make sure that we were able to continue, to keep that spirit of that program alive, but sort of put our own spin on it. And, for people who've been listening to Left Reckoning, they notice a lot of similar themes as the Michael Brooks show, but it's Matt and I who have, particular experience. Me being from Texas and Matt being from North Dakota, and we try to bring that, kind of background into our, left-wing internationalist, super dangerous politics.
Yeah, at the time, at the start, it was really, I think, motivated most strongly by wanting to stay in touch with the sort of community that we built with the Michael Brooks show, which was a really, unique and special thing. We did a bunch of live shows, and people would always turn out, and numbers to those that were kind of shocking to me and were very fun to talk to and mingle with. And I think, at first I was very happy with how able we were to keep in touch with everybody and keep the community together. And now, we've been going for a few years, and you have some people that weren't even there for the Michael Brooks show period, where we're, going into the IDW as if it's fresh and not like something we're looking in the, rear view mirror. And it's been an interesting thing to go through this last almost decade of politics,
right?
With the community.
And we're in a particularly strange period right now, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to, anticipate too much, but really kind of one we could have seen coming with just the criticism of the IDW.
Yeah, for sure.
Saying that their free speech, so-called principles don't amount to much because they're silent on, for instance, boycott, divest, sanctions against Israel and the anti-BDS laws. I think Andrew Tate's probably the only IDW adjacent person yet that has any sort of a pro-Palestine view of things. And, he's not exactly an asset to the cause.
Yeah, he's absolutely not. But yeah, the IDW, I feel like, does tend to be like a bit of a microcosm for either what's about to come up and be the new right-wing sort of talking point, or just for generally how dishonestly it operates.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by, I don't know if you guys see on Twitter all of the ads with the Free Press, Barry Weiss's new sort of venture. I guess University of Austin, Texas / Dallas isn't.
The University of Austin is not in Austin. It's always important to remind people of that.
But it's always like, you can't trust any media, and now here's a new media platform by somebody who his basic mission in Barry Weiss is to lie. It's
and it's called the honest media or something, right? Is that
the Free Press?
There's also the word honest in something that she does. I forget, but
yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah, it's really like gaslighty and just wild. But I've been blocking ads so fast ads and porn bots on Twitter that I'm worried I'm going to accidentally like block people that I like, because if I see like a first name, I'm like block, just because all the porn bots are like, Pam, Linda, and then one day I'm going to block a real human Linda, and I don't want to do that. But
yeah, you're right. Honestly, with Barry Weiss is her podcast. And it's funny, like the show more feature on Twitter, it's either like going to be porn bots or somebody that's saying really nasty, like probably racist stuff. It's always like a little like a American Gladiator style run through the gauntlet, and you're not sure what's going to be on the other side of it.
Yeah, Barry Weiss, like she's an underestimated, awful person, I feel like. Even though so many people recognize how awful she is, I feel like it's just not enough. It's not enough. Like, she is palling around with Douglas Murray, who is, openly fash and white nationalisty. And for a person who values their Jewish identity so much, it's a very odd thing to be doing.
And she's also like the first, cancel culture figure, right? She's like the canceller in chief, which is funny with all these, folks, in that, I don't know, alternative media or whatever you want to call them, is that their whole perspective is sort of based upon this idea is like, we're the ones who aren't afraid of speech. And yet, like, actually, like a lot of that political project has been sort of set up around like, hey, they might not be, immediately trying to send like the Twitter mob at folks, but they're trying to get like the government and your boss involved in your speech, which I'm sorry is way more egregious of an affront to free speech than somebody saying you're wrong or are stupid.
Yeah, it's unreal. The level of hypocrisy on that has just gone off the charts. Sam Harris just released an episode called Freedom and Censorship, and it's with talking with the FIRE guy. FIRE is one of these free speech organizations that presents itself as, neutral and objective and rational, but it's like completely, seems to me, Quillette adjacent. So I'm only halfway through, to be fair, but so far there has been not a single mention of the constant censorship of pro-Palestinian perspectives, the beating down of students who are protesting peacefully. It's just like the typical, cancel culture and students and wokeness, and those are the biggest problems so far in the episode. And no mention of Israel shutting down like entire channels, seizing the Associated Press equipment, targeting journalists. Like, these are just not things that come up when they talk about freedom of speech and censorship. It's so odd.
Yeah, I mean, and really what it is their concern for freedom of speech has always been one of relatively privileged, powerful, empowered people, which is that we need to protect people like us from the mob, which wants to criticize us for saying things like, Israel's just defending itself when actually they see a genocide happening. And they're not really concerned with, workers. Like, I mean, it was very interesting, the Chappelle thing that would happen in First Avenue in Minneapolis after his third special in a row dwelling on trans people. Mm-hmm. The staff of the venue said, we don't want to put the show on, actually. We don't want to host him at this moment. Like, we're just not going to do that. They did a wildcat strike, and the show didn't happen. And to me, I think that is an expression of free speech,
exactly.
Whereas these people would see it as a suppression of David Chappelle's free speech. And that's the fundamental split, I think, that happens, and how these people are able to sort of present themselves as free speech activists. It is free speech for them. They definitely want to, they want Robert Kennedy to be able to go to American Samoa and spread vaccine. That's the awesome type of freedom. But when it comes to like criticizing Gaza policy, that's getting in the way of safety, I think.
Yeah, like, I wonder if we got some of the Palestinians to start saying racial slurs, if these guys would like step up and defend them more. Because
That's what's funny
No,
about
they would
Yeah, go.
100% attack them, and the reason is like what's funny about these they 100% would, because what's funny about these folks is like, all these figures you just mentioned, like Sam Harris. Hell, even RFK, right? RFK is supposed to be the guy running in this election who's, a truth teller and is not afraid of, the Washington consensus or whatnot. And yet, unlike the most uniform political perspective in the American elite and the American political class, which is like an undying support for Israel, he's like outflanking Joe Biden and Donald Trump,
Wow.
right? And think about folks like Harris and Barry Weiss. They always are talking about how like they're the ones who are unafraid to speak, the truth and to stand up and take these unpopular opinions. When the vast majority of their kind of political coverage or political commentary is just like defending the status quo, be
Absolutely.
it police officers killing poor and black folks, be it supporting Israel. You can go down the list. It's like it's just amazing to sit here and be like, I'm being really brave and saying unpopular things, and the unpopular things are just all the things that you would hear in the United States State Department, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's so ridiculous, but they do like a good racial slur. They all come out for that in droves. So that's why I'm saying maybe that's a strategy for Palestinians.
Well, I mean, they get it both ways now, because you see, especially like pro-Israel comedy, it is just like making fun of trans people or gay people and being like, you would be killed. It's like, it's very much like wallowing in the imagination of my enemies, which at this point now are like, the lefty blue hair types in their minds, just imagining about them being killed or being treated like just brutally by Palestinians. But it's like that all clearly exists in your heads as well.
Right. And it's also like lines that PragerU and Babylon Bee did like 5 years ago. So it's really saying something that Israeli comedy is stepping up to the PragerU level now, or the Babylon Bee level. It's truly, truly incredible. And it's such a shame because Jewish comedy is like known to be just so sharp and witty and everything that Israeli comedy is not.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is, I think, what happens when you add nationalism into the mix. Because, it's hard to really imagine, like, a funny Israeli comic that isn't, like, completely skewering the foundations of that society, right? It just seems, like, kind of aggressive, actually, unfortunately. And, I have the Criterion channel, and I saw they had an Israeli film, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'll check out that one. I can't remember what it was, but it was from the perspective and directed by and written by a Palestinian Israeli citizen. And the story was a short movie about that person dating a member of the IDF and how her member of the Palestinian community were like, hey, that seems ill-advised. And then it turned out that she was spying on them, is my rough memory of the synopsis. And it's like, yeah, that's really the only kind of art you can make there, is this modern, like, sort of 1984 stuff, because everything else is really the zone of interest.
Yeah, very depressing truth, but I'm sure my listeners are sick of hearing about this, but it's just been such a weird realization for me, just having grown up in Saudi Arabia and just thinking that that level of harshness and authoritarianism was sort of unique to that kind of country, but it clearly isn't. I mean, what I'm seeing from Israel seems like magnitudes worse than what I saw growing up in Saudi. And, people usually, when I say something like that, they're like, oh, you're just trying to be inflammatory. But it's I'm not. Like, I'm truly just shocked, because we did have morality police out on the streets, and it was awful. And they were, like, carrying a cane, and they could, like, swipe you on the ankle for having, like, your hair out of the scarf. But that level of impunity and nastiness, and it's like a vibe that you get from people that were in the morality police. I feel like what you see from the IDF is like that on steroids. I just saw a video of them like bursting into a bakery, and like this guy was like making this bread, and they just like slammed his head into the dough and like just started beating him.
And the Saudis wouldn't have the. I mean, it's just like it's a different. And it's like when you say that kind of countries, I think the one way you can still group these together is sort of foreign policy partners that project force of the West in the region, and because they wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff without us arming them ultimately,
and defending.
Right? Exactly, but I do think the difference with Israel is like the Saudis wouldn't be able to just like we're going to actually just demolish every university here or
attack every hospital.
Exactly, like that with that sort of level of impunity, it is remarkable, and it's scary because I think everybody knew, or I think a lot of people knew. Some people didn't. It's wild how, for instance, like a David Pakman seems to have been surprised by how bad this has gone.
I have really enjoyed your coverage on David Pakman, let me tell you.
I mean, to come out and barely talk about this, but to only do sort of plant your flag in the ground that the IDF doesn't attack hospitals and that Rashida Tlaib should apologize is something is pretty awful. But immediately on October 7th, if you would have said the phrase, "Okay, Israel's going to go for it," a lot of people. I mean, if you're familiar with the Nakba and all the occupation sense, you would have known what that meant. Is they want Gaza, and they're going to use this as a pretext because they very often use violence in this as a pretext for, if not just killing, complete like land seizures. And there is a huge part of that country's political body that hates that they ever gave up on Gaza and looks at it like a big giant betrayal. And they are empowered still to this day in Gaza. I mean, Bibi Netanyahu, and I mean, he's like literally a centrist, compared to right. And so like, and that's what's happened. And the problem is, it would have happened earlier, but it's not really realistic because you have all these people like David Petraeus, all of our generals being like, guys, you're going to need to execute about 250% better than we executed our wars in the last century to do this. And the IDF does not have that discipline. And that's one of the other interesting things. Ryan Grimm is on this beat, is every time often American politician says the IDF is the most moral force in the world. Yeah. And I'm not someone who normally takes offense on behalf of our military, but I am very intrigued by people who reach out to people like Ryan Grimm saying that is just massively offensive. They are flagrant violators in the way that, I'm not trying to romanticize the American military here. I think, things like My Lai were more symptomatic than individual incidents, but and not to lead up to the Iraq War and everything like that. But I think it's just wild to see people who claim to be patriots, like Ted Cruz, be like, it's better than our army. What on earth is going on?
Well, even just the fact that they will accept criticism about the U.S., but they just simply cannot handle even the most minor criticism of Israel. It's so bizarre.
I mean, I really think that it's because they have to make the water so muddy, because what's going on right now and what has also been going on since the Nakba is just so egregious that you can't actually have forgive me, an exchange of free and open ideas on the subject, right? Because it really it's unjustifiable. And that's one thing that you really notice with a lot of pro-Israel folks is, it's all these kind of what if conversations, well, what if this happened, or what if that happens, or if this happens, maybe this will happen. And what is the intention of that? Well, it's to actually distract from the ongoing material reality, what's happening on the ground, and instead have these kind of fanciful philosophical conversations about what would happen if, there was a force trying to destroy Israel from the inside or whatnot. And it's they have to operate outside of the actual factual reality, because again, it is one of those things that is so clear. And that's why, for example, like these student protests that we've been seeing all across the country have been put down so brutally by Republican and Democratic governments, because the demand of the students is like too damn simple, right? They're saying, stop killing the mothers and the children and bombing Gaza, and stop funding it with our university money.
Yeah, that's why you have to pretend like they're actively supporting terrorism. And that's also why you see things like that are just so incoherent in such a short space of time. You'll see like Biden clapping for a ceasefire at that university speech, and then arming Israel at the same time, and it makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean, they can't square the contradiction, because this isn't meant to be solved with words, frankly. When that Morehouse valedictorian said a immediate and permanent ceasefire. Permanent is a key word. Yeah. Because ultimately, you'll see all these folks, and I saw Aaron Rupart do this on Twitter, a big Biden booster on Twitter, say, well, who's going to govern Gaza? And like that's ultimately the thing, is like, actually, just because people elect a group of people who are perhaps hateful, doesn't mean you do a regime change on them, because otherwise we would have to do a regime change on Israel, because they have as many extremists who have a larger body count on their side of things. Who should go? Like, we know the answer to how these things get solved. Like, this is not the first time that, say, Ireland and England had to negotiate, right? Mm-hmm. That ultimately didn't. And there's articles in. You don't even have to, pick a side. I don't think it's that hard to. But just if you say we want the violence and terrorism to end, you have to negotiate. You have to negotiate. You have to treat. And that the problem is, Israel doesn't want to negotiate with Hamas, just like they didn't want to negotiate with the PLO, because actually they want to take all the land. And they don't. Right. Once you acknowledge a negotiating partner, then all of a sudden you have to give things up. And they frankly do not want to grant anything like that to Palestine, because they want to be Israel. And they literally, Bibi Netanyahu came to the United States of America with a map of the entire region, including the Golan Heights, and the West Bank and Gaza, and it said Israel on it. Like, and we all have to act like we don't see that, because then you have to ask harder. Then the questions are even like more untenable. But that is what's happening. That is the very clear intention, and that's why you just can't. You have to be like, well, I guess we just have to do a coup and regime change until they elect a people who's what supports like Israel, just the generic Israel's right to exist. Well, again, Israel's right to exist is what Bibi Netanyahu pointed out on that map, which is that we got all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, a right to exist and a right to defend yourself has really been, the definitions have been expanded to include a right to attack every hospital, murder civilians, murder journalists.
Because it's a principle everyone can agree with, but like, did Palestinians have a right to defend themselves? Like, nobody even, everybody like blushes at that concept.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, have you felt yourself like radicalizing over the past few months on this issue, or is this kind of where you've always been?
Speaking for myself, like, I think I've probably been radicalized. I think the last over half decade, seeing what happened to Jeremy Corbyn and the Jeremy Corbyn wing in the UK on this issue, I really like the way it started. Like, sort of the pro-Israel lobby started interviewing in politics that out here made me take a closer look to it in a way that maybe I hadn't 10 years ago. The last 6 months, it's just been sort of, I've been feeling less radical because everyone is getting to where, I've been on it. Right. Like it's been almost like I've been feeling normified, less than radicalized, because it's things like apartheid, words like genocide, which I think, frankly, pre-existed October 7th. I think we've seen massacres and ethnic cleansing since then, but the separation and the sort of bifurcation of the Palestinian people is a genocidal strategy that we saw in this country here. And you're starting to see, people who, like Ilan Pappé, Israeli historian, who I think a lot of some people have been afraid to talk to. He's just all over the place now. And, you see like Owen Jones and Mehdi Hassan, who I think they've always done good work, but I think on, certain issues, they've been in the stratosphere of this media thing and maybe have ducked some punches a little bit. Now they are doing, Zateo did a great sit down with Pepe and Diana Butu and about the ICC warrants. And this is, and even like the Pod Save America guys.
Yeah, I'm shocked at that.
They still annoy me often to follow them, but I do like seeing them come out with the occasional sane thing on Palestine every now and then. I don't think I haven't felt more radical. Well, that's probably a bit of a stretch. I've definitely been doing a lot of reading in a way that maybe make me a little bit more radical, but I've had this sort of overall opposite feeling.
I can see how that would come about in your position. What about you, David?
I mean, for me, Palestine, when I was a freshman in school, I joined Students for Justice in Palestine, and that's actually been was my entryway into more radical socialist politics. So it's always been there. But I think one of the things that this has sort of done for me personally and politically is it's increased obviously the urgency in the fight, but also has, in a lot of ways, sort of brought this fight for Palestinian human rights closer to home, and sort of recognizing how connected that is to a lot of other things that are going on, politically. Like for example, I'm here in Austin, Texas, in my hometown, right? And Texas is not a place where people expect there to be serious, large, pro-Palestine marches. And here we are, thousands and thousands of people in the streets. And I will have to add that one of the things I love about Texas is that people can come here from anywhere and be Texan. And we're in the streets with a bunch of Palestinian cowboys leading the march, on horseback. And this really, really powerful stuff. And then what we see here is the connection to our state government, which is trying to ban organizations like Students for Justice in Palestine. Now we have the DSA and CARE, suing our government, and hopefully we can support them, and hopefully they win that suit. But all of these attacks on democracy, that are just a part of all these other struggles that I'm involved with, are deeply, deeply connected here. Because I think one of the things that's really frightening and kind of radicalizing for a lot of folks is one the clarity of what's going on and how wrong it is, right? And then seeing that, knowing that the government, that Joe Biden, that Greg Abbott, that all these people are seeing the same thing that you're seeing, and that they're so committed to the opposite, position as you are. I think it's really frightening in a lot of ways. I think it's really radicalizing, and it goes into this just fundamental reality of American democracy, is that our government just does not reflect the values of the people. Even here in Texas, which again, Republicans win here, on all these issues from Palestine to abortion rights. What gets passed in the government is not even reflective of Texas Republicans, right? And that's a very scary thing to realize, right? That you live in a democracy, and yet it's not a question of sort of convincing the masses of certain topics.
Well, just even how you have presidents that are not people who win the popular vote. That's so strange. But myself, I am definitely more of a lib than you guys, but I have certainly felt myself feel radicalized by the past few months. And I also, being of Muslim background, I felt a hesitancy of saying too much or anything critical of Israel, because you're always smeared as an anti-Semite. And I think that really was effective in keeping people like me very quiet for a long time, even though we knew a lot of things were wrong. But it's they're going to say it's just because, we're of Muslim background or something like that. But I think that's changing because some of the excuses are so ridiculous now. Like, charging Netanyahu or the ICC requesting a warrant against Netanyahu being anti-Semitic and things like that. It's like, no. This is just an excuse. It's so blatantly just an excuse. And everyone can now start to see it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I benefited from, because I mean, working with Sam Cedar and Michael Brooks for a decade, both Jewish guys, I mean, Sam wouldn't consider himself anti-Zionist because he hates labels, but, basically there. And Michael Brooks, definitely. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I necessarily needed that, but it absolutely helps the confidence to see. And also, it also builds a type of resentment towards Zionists, frankly, for the way that they speak and treat anti-Zionist Jews. The sort of brutal sort of insinuations and pathologizing of people who I think are fundamentally righteous and just not fascist nationalists like Zionists are. Admittedly, there are historical reasons why a nationalism got adopted by so many people in the wake of a trauma, but ultimately, like the folks who are saying, actually this should be a safe space for everybody and not just Jewish people, because you can't actually do that fundamentally, because it leads to imperatives for dispossession and control. Those people are right. And I am so, and you see that all the students, and obviously not just Jewish students, but at the forefront for like in groups like Jewish Voices for Peace, leading these protests, and I just feel so much anger toward the media that would imply that they are like tokens or that sort of thing. Like media who are just absolutely carrying water for one of the worst crimes against humanity that has been committed by an American ally since America was doing them a few decades ago. But like this is just appalling, and that's all. I guess I'm kind of rambling at this point.
No, but I mean, I think that the point about like tokens, right, is like an important one, because it's important to like the issue of like Palestine, but also just like generally in American politics, what like the media and what the ruling class has been trying to do is to just tell you not to believe your own lying eyes, right? If you're seeing a bunch of young Jewish students like organizing, saying not in our name, oh, that's not real, they're tokens, it's a trick, or everybody's a paid protester, that was very popular under Trump, or Nancy Pelosi saying these are Russian agents. This is not just like a Republican versus a Democrat thing. There's actually like a very concerted effort, I think, to sort of detach people from reality, and that's I think that's a really dangerous thing. One, because obviously people are confused about what's going on the ground, but it's extremely dehumanizing, because if you are somebody who's like understanding of the world is sort of mediated through these folks, and like all these guys are paid agitators, or just trying to trick you somehow, and the police beat them up. Well, it's like, oh, those guys were kind of dangerous actors in the first place. It's a really dangerous thing that we've been seeing, and it's not it's Palestine, but it's Black Lives Matter. It's a whole host of things in this country.
Yeah, and I mean, the right has been targeting university students for years and years and years now, right? So it's very convenient that this also fits under that, and they could now get the police to crack their skulls open. Yeah, and the token thing, like, it's especially frustrating when actually the pro-Israel marches are using tokens to show how diverse they are and have them speak at the same rallies with, like, anti-Semitic, what's that guy's name? John Hagee?
Yeah, Hagee. Yeah, that's a very good point. Like there is that's their diversity, and on the for the anti-Zionist Jews, you get the ultra-Orthodox in Jerusalem to the to the other ups end of the spectrum, and there's a lot of projection. What Zionism is pretty nasty. An unfortunate ideology, because all the suggestions that like a historian like Avi Shlaim or whoever, these sort of new historians in Israel who basically said, the Nakba happened and this is a problem. When they're described as self-hating, I can't help but be think about all of these sort of like right-wing Zionists who said like we're not we're going to straighten up our backs, and we're not going to be like the weak Jews of the past. And I think that is a fundamentally, and I understand why it happens with the Holocaust and things like that, but that is a fundamentally like that is actually a self-hating and a racist
victim blaming, really.
Yeah, exactly. And like it's a real sickness, and you see people, and not to mention like Palestinian writers, what they've had to go through all this, just trying to be heard as like an equal, and not as if they have like a bomb underneath their shirt, just because they say like, hey, maybe the way that Israel's existence has been determined by Britain and then America, it doesn't entirely work. And it's like, well, you might as well have just thrown a pipe bomb into the room right now. And we've seen, again, I just will reiterate, The Guardian had a piece in like 2008, like, you must negotiate with terrorists, and the lesson was to us at that point, like, we can't just fight terror by lobbing missiles everywhere. We have to actually try to address, if not like these people as legitimate political actors, at least the material conditions that lead them to gain support. And we just don't do that because we don't want to.
Well, especially in this situation, it's more obvious than ever. This isn't just about like a blind religious extremism. They have clearly stated goals, and I mean, when you oppress a population for so many decades, there's no way that people will not be pushing back on that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I also think I feel for Jewish people who don't like that a sort of rabid nationalism has been so strongly associated with their religion. And this is the story of we get a lot of callers who really want to get on this is fundamentally like clash of civilizations, and it's just like, this is the class of nationalisms. Why are people so resistant to actually historicizing the violence here that they claim to care so much about? That I mean, people care so much about it, they'll just resign it to that. It's been going on for thousands of years, rather than looking at the fact that actually the nationalisms of the mid-century contributed to this fact. And this is the problem we see throughout the world, is wherever we see hardened borders being hardened and nationalism being more and more exclusive, that's not a recipe for human thriving.
Right, and religion-based nationalism too. Like, we can see it with Hindu nationalism, Islamist nationalism, Christian nationalism, and now we see it with Zionism too.
I would like a really good treatment of religion, what's been happening to it since these nationalisms, because I think nationalism really has been in the driver's seat for a really long time in like those examples you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is it's almost using like it's religion as an excuse for authoritarianism, right? And so how are you guys feeling about the recent ICC stuff? I mean, there's still no warrant. It could still be rejected. And I know how I feel. I feel like nothing matters. And, I feel really hopeless. But, maybe this is optically at least good to see.
I think it's probably important from a dialectical perspective, just to show, one, what is the International Criminal Court? I like back up. International Criminal Court is sort of a spiritual successor to Nuremberg. Mm-hmm. And yet all of a sudden when the ICC says, hey, let's look at like Western governments, the people who did the Holocaust and didn't take as many Jewish refugees as they should have, like those people, when you start looking at those leaders, then all of a sudden it doesn't work. Like that was the whole point of Nuremberg, right? And now it's like, unless you're looking at Putin or African dictators, as Karim Khan said I think he was alluding to Lindsey Graham telling him. It's just a wild. It just says the exact perversion. It's just like how, to make up for their anti-Semitism, Europe decided to colonize the Middle East, right? Like it is the exact same sort of. I don't know what the psychological term for that would be like, but you remove it from yourself and put it externalizing your issues onto other people. But I think I'm pretty heartened by Diana Butu. Like I said, I think she's a really good analyst on this. Ultimately, it's a hugely symbolic moment, and I also think it's a major test for liberal internationalism that I frankly hope it passes. As somewhat cynical about it, I like seeing Norway say, if Netanyahu or Gallant travel to any of the member states, they will have to arrest him. That, even as you say, the warrant hasn't been validated yet. That is what needs to be happening. And whether there's the gumption to actually do anything, that I guess is something it'll be nice to find out. It'll be nice to find out either way. And so I welcome anything that has these Israelis and American Zionists, Christian Zionists in Congress really upset. And so we covered Stephen Crowder last night. His analysis, I know, was that it's gay. It's gay that the ICC. It's kind of meaningless.
So I was looking forward to getting a unified theory of that. Unfortunately, didn't really.
It's mainly that it's gay and that the ICC doesn't matter and it's kind of pointless. But also look out, because Biden might give them so much power that they end freedom in the world. So that's sort of their analysis there. But I think it's good. I think it's interesting to not mention torture, but mention the rapes, and which is not to say that I deny that rapes happened on October 7th, but I think the way that it's deployed, we've covered this with Tanya Cerisier and Heidi Matthews, the way it's being used as a propaganda object. So I think there's a little bit of politicking going on with 3 Hamas versus 2 Israelis. Yeah. But in the years past, I can't help but think it would have been 3 Hamas and 0 Israelis. Yeah. So, I will take what I can get. I'm not sure what you think, David.
I mean, I think that, I'm in general agreement with you. I think that, I understand the kind of hesitation to be like, all right, it's time, they're going to go get them. We know how these organizations operate. We also know that American impunity can do a lot to shield Israel from the consequences of its own actions. And we saw that with, I think it was Blinken, basically saying to someone that if this goes through, then if Palestine is recognized by the United Nations, if they become.
I need to look into it more, but I think it's sort of like. I gather it's sort of like a return of a Trump either threat or policy, which was to defund these sorts of food bank programs.
It would basically that the United States would stop funding the United Nations in general, and Blinken's because he's a sweet boy, right, and it's a humanitarian at heart. It's like, oh, and by the way, that would mean all of the food programs would go away, right? He's the one who's highlighting that, by the way, which is really nasty. And the point is that so America has always tried to sort of stop international organizations from treating Israel like any other country and calling them out when they do horrifying things like with the genocide they've been doing in Gaza. And what this ICC move could mean, right, if these are approved, is I think continuing this schism. I mean, you saw Norway, Matt, but let's also not forget that France has even come out and said that they will respect the ICC decision. This is a massive kind of thing. And look, I don't know how much this is going to shift things around, but I think there's 100% a real chance of a kind of schism between particularly the United States and some of these European countries over this issue, because I think that to the listeners and stuff, we might dislike Joe Biden, but and that sort of sometimes colors our understanding of what's going on. I think that you really have to recognize that Joe Biden in particular is an absolute fanatic on this question. like an absolute fanatic on this question, even by the standards of like the European nations. Which have been very willing to accept a lot of horrifying things by Israel. That this kind of schism, it creates kind of political opportunities, for different ways about thinking about international justice and like the international, community in general. It gives a lot of opportunities to, countries like Brazil or Mexico, to be seen as kind of leaders to create new coalitions to start to challenge this bloc that doesn't do anything for anybody but like the Zionists and the people who benefit directly from American empire.
Yeah, these are definitely, very strange times. And
and just to piggyback on that, I think it's almost again, like dispassionately.
Very IDW term there.
Exactly. I'm just looking at this logically. It doesn't seem like it's good for Israel, because any books written about Israel, many times authors are saying at some point they're going to need to learn how to become good neighbors, and that just never happened. And now the world is fed up and starting to recognize Palestine as a state, even. And then I saw a tweet saying that we might live in a world where more states recognize Palestine than recognize Israel.
Oh, that would be something.
And Biden is not doing them any favors, I think, by having. I think from a certain extent, look, that's an important part of the world. There's a lot of trading and shipping and stuff and considerations that go around there. So I don't. I hesitate to put it too much in Joe Biden's, Zionist dementia going on right now. But I do think that is a definite factor. Like, I think you see Obama people, Ben Rhodes, the former Obama foreign policy advisor, being like, hey, let's not throw the ICC under the bus. And it's not because these guys just love the idea of Israel being held to account. It's like, we want to use that for Putin.
Right.
And like, this stuff existed for a reason, and it wasn't, wasn't just the idealistic, like we do the Nuremberg stuff for the future now. It's kind of because it served a purpose. Right.
And did you see this tweet from the Israeli Foreign Ministry? They did this threatening video, and they tweeted it about how Ireland is recognizing a Palestinian state. Just completely unhinged behavior. Is this a country or a YouTube troll? I don't.
Again, they haven't been served well, because if you were given, just for the sake of existing, $3 billion a year for missiles and stuff, and to tell people how great you were, you also wouldn't have a very good sense of how you're coming off to the world. America hasn't served Israel well at all by allowing this type of impunity, and it's like we sponsored a sort of a new Jim Crow, basically, so we could have a aircraft carrier at the eastern part of the Mediterranean.
The way that Israel acts right now is sort of like, if like a super rich, spoiled, and sheltered kid, got thrown into like a dorm at like a basic American public university, right? They'd be making threatening videos of their roommates and seeing just absolutely wild stuff. And I think it truly has been unhinged to see how, for a country that does run Israel and has been very good at suppressing dissent in that country, their foreign outreach is just horrendous. And you'd think with the amount of folks involved in that project, they'd be a little bit better at it. But no, it really is unhinged stuff. I hadn't seen this Irish video, but I'm sure I'm going to be very entertained.
And I get a sense that it's worse than the first years of Israel, the first decades of Israel. You'll have even the famous thing where I think it was Reagan said, told the Israeli that there's bombing in Lebanon the way there was a Holocaust. Mm-hmm. Israelis need to hear that stuff. They don't need to hear, oh, you're just doing your best defending yourself. By the way, what happened to those Why am I seeing kids? And Biden, of course, has his own history here, where Menachem Begin, who was a terrorist cell leader, then was the prime minister of Israel, not the only person that made that run.
Yeah.
In the 80s, had to tell Biden, like, hey, can you chill on telling us to do whatever we need to do? You're kind of doing it a bit too much. And that's Biden, and that's Biden, what he's doing now.
I was just going to say that, one of the most charming things about Biden, and it's a very short list, is, good old Irish Joe, when he sort of trolls the British monarchy and things like that. Yeah. I wonder if this video might move him a little bit, might, sort of put his dual loyalty in question.
Good point. I wonder. It is a completely unhinged video. I will DM it to you. You should watch it.
Oh, Lord.
They also have this very sinister sounding, robotic, monotonous voice. Wow. But there's definitely rich kid, spoiled rich kid, Veruca Salt vibes, from the original Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Like, Daddy, I want it now. Get me a golden goose.
It is something else.
Yeah. I mean, do you guys have any IRL friends that have turned out to be Zionists and very disappointing?
Yeah. One of my buddies, and to be honest, we kind of had drifted. You get in your 30s, it's harder to keep up with the people that when they live across the country. And it's just that was sort of the final straw that, once you already have a relationship that's sort of drifting a little bit, you're not coming back from this. And it's sad because, it's somebody I know who they did the birthright trip, and I think sort of bought the whole hook, line, and sinker about Muslims and about the spear point of civilization that Israel represented, honestly, in a way that it's grim and it's so hard because on the one sense, this is all trying to see into people's minds. Immediately post October 7th, there was some. I gave some grace. I'm not.
Yeah, same.
Being what they're right, but immediately I could tell you don't know what you're about to support, or you're not ready to fully acknowledge it publicly, either or. And even I at that point couldn't have imagined how many months and how horrific it would be, and no change. No real change, and there won't be one. The death count could, I remember when it was 8,000 being what is enough?
Yeah.
The death toll could reach six figures, and there won't be a change from a lot of these folks. It will be because a lot of them have internalized that something like this needed to happen anyway, which is, again, that's death camp mentality, and it's horrifying. It's a horrifying irony of history that in a project that ostensibly is sold as reparations for the Holocaust, you have seen people come to a zone of interest style
right.
Acceptance that people are going to need to die in very large numbers in order for me to remain living the life that I want to live.
Yeah. It's been really sad for me too to see, because I can't relate to that kind of defensiveness. I have no hesitance in calling out all of the countries that I'm associated with, Canada or Saudi Arabia or Pakistan. Whenever they do something horrific, I'm the first one there, fuck this, what the fuck is happening? So I just cannot relate to that defensiveness, and you get a sense as someone of Muslim background that people are looking to you to denounce Islamic extremism very, very quickly, and I've never hesitated.
Right.
I think that there's a part of it though that's and not trying to sit here as an American and talk this country is sinless, obviously not. But for Israel, it's just it's too central, and to like the entire identity of Israel, is this kind of militant commitment to the expulsion of Palestinians. That like to even acknowledge it, does like directly threaten like your kind of personal political identity as like an Israeli. I mean, in a way that like again, like America is a country founded on brutal horrors, but it's a country that also has like that tradition of resistance to it that is like just is a part of the fabric here as well. That's sort of been fought for. And articulated and built up over time, where you can say, I think what our country did to the Native Americans was wrong. I think that slavery was wrong, and you're still like an American. You know what I mean? While the Israeli like identity has sort of been built up around like ignoring this kind of question.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, and that's why you see the difference even in Americans who are more defensive of Israel than they are of America.
It's so wild. It's just like, it's unbelievable. I mean, the laws that are getting passed here in Texas, I don't know, we're not like unique here, but it's like, I mean, hell, we're getting this in Congress too at this point. So, coming to a place near you, but, it's just wild to see the way, that like the state government is, for example, trying to get involved in the way that things are taught in universities here.
Yeah.
And just like such a kind of passionate, hands-on way, and it's, and like San Antonio, this area is like Texas is more of a hotbed of Christian Zionism, and actually a lot of Christian Zionist money is like raised in the area of the state that I'm in Central Texas. But it still is like, it's truly amazing to see the mobilization around this issue that you don't see for all kinds of other nasty constituencies that we might have in this state. I mean, it's truly a passionate mobilization.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is really. I was in Texas for the first time ever last year, and it was very fascinating because, I mean, I know I don't have to live there, so I was like, whoa, this is very odd. Like, because every other car that we saw had like a bumper sticker that was strange, and now we were in Houston, so I don't know what, like, Austin, I'm sure Austin is more progressive than that, but like we saw, they have those family bumper stickers where, you've got like a mom and a dad and they depict how many pets and how many kids they have.
Yeah.
We saw a gun version of that. So like the guy had like my family and like all the different kinds of guns.
Hell yeah. We get, I mean, we get the, that's definitely all over here. What's fun about Austin is like, it's like the, where Alex Jones got his start. I used to watch Alex Jones on public access when I was a kid.
Wow.
I just was watching the TV, and then I realized, when he became a kind of major figure later, or at least I, reacquainted. It's like, oh, that was the funny man I watched as a boy. But I love, in terms of bumper stickers, there's a guy who goes to my local HEB that I love, and I've been trying to, like, in a non-creepy way, wait to see him, because it's like a very kind of, it's like Bush did 9/11 stickers, and arrest Karl Rove and all these. It's just like a really awesome, very like unhinged kind of, also like definitely like Return to the Gold Standard stuff. But it's like, Texas got a lot of folks and a lot of freaks, and we love it for that.
Yeah, definitely fascinating. I also went to Hobby Lobby for the first time ever because we don't have that here. And it was so weird. They had like
I haven't been to that since I was a kid,
Bible section with like different kinds of Bibles on sale. Like there's like a teen Bible and a mom Bible and like, a comic book Bible, an action Bible. I'm like, wow. And then there was the gun home decor section. There was like gun lamps, gun toilet paper holders. I mean, if I had a lot of money to waste, I might have got some joke stuff. But
it's funny. The Bible stuff is funny, not just in Texas, but all across this country. Like, I'm an atheist, but it's like I find that stuff to be so sacrilegious.
Right.
You can get like a hunter's Bible, and it's just like camo and stuff. I don't know. It's like it seems. Well, I mean, the Trump Bible, obviously, that's just like you almost won't bring that up. It's like too cliche. But that, or like Matt and I did. We talked about Vivek Ramaswamy on the program.
Yeah, I saw that today.
And his like new theology.
Oh, I didn't see that. I saw the part
about
with
the founding fathers.
Ann Coulter.
Oh, well,
no. No, I know you got to check out him talking about what we like when we get to the afterlife. We will need to tell the founding fathers the sacrifices we gave to our country. And it's just a fascinating thought experiment because I've never really thought I've thought okay, let's say heaven exists. I haven't been able to actually believe that for about 25 years now, but let's say that it actually exists. I'm probably going to go to my family and people that I love who died and say, hey, what's up? I'm not going to be like, look, George, we tried to stop DEI, but they just have the numbers.
He looks at you, gives you a big thumbs up, Matt, and you walk right through those pearly gates.
He smiles at me with those wooden teeth. He's like, you gave it your best.
But it's like, the point is like, it's wild to me that, conservatives are so okay with people like, I don't know, lampooning their religion in that kind of way. But I guess, I don't know, it's wild to see sometimes how superficial those commitments actually are in practice.
Yeah, for sure. I think just modern religiosity has to be, on some level, either superficial or full of cognitive dissonance, because it's hard to coexist, for both of those things to coexist.
I do think it operates like a civic nationalism. Because I'm somebody who went to church every week with my parents growing up, Catholics. I'm shocked at the number of people who consider themselves religious but don't go to church but for 5 times a year. Like to me, it's like that was part of the thing. Like, I'm not religious, so I don't go. If I was, I would go. And yet people make an entire political identity and, change their foreign policy based on an identification with a religion that, I don't really understand how they relate to it except through, consuming media, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much about that political polarization feeding it too, right? It's like maybe anti-wokeness feeding your religiosity. Like Ion Hersey Ali, best example. Mm-hmm. And, more recently Dawkins and how he's sad about the churches going away. And
oh, yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you this if it's not too late. Just really, are these guys getting eclipsed? Like the IDW folks? I'm for real, because so much I think of they're probably there's the early atheist thing when everyone's getting excited about saying, oh, I don't believe in the sky dad or whatever, right? That was 2010s.
Yeah.
And then there was this kind of age of rationality, right? It's like Daily Show Times, the Republicans are crazy, the liberals are smart and read books, and they were very popular at that period of time. And then it's the Trump years, and it's a kind of continuation of oh yeah, we don't like this kind of really dumb stuff, but the liberals have gotten way too woke. And now it's straight up stuff like Elon Musk being immigrants are invading our country and having a bunch of children, and they're going to replace white people. I just wonder if the IDW is going to be able to survive this next stage without just completely being a follower. Because at a certain point, I find that the discussions are getting way more reactionary, way more racist. I think the kind of little wink thing, you're going to move on from Sam Harris, I think, pretty quickly to the guys who might be more explicit with this kind of stuff.
Well, and that was happening before too, right? There were articles in early 2016, 2017 about how new atheism was a pipeline, and the YouTube algorithms were sending people from IDW content to extremely fascist content. But I think their niche will always be their niche, right? For the people who want to masquerade as intellectual and too smart for those uncouth MAGA types, they will always have a place in those people's hearts.
It's funny. I guess I don't know if you get too many comments or anything like that on your platform, but since Matt and I are on YouTube, we get a lot of them. And I love whenever we do an IDW video, the comments are so good. Because one, it's people getting mad. It's how dare you, attack Sam Harris when he's read all these books. But the funniest thing is look, I'm not trying to be an elitist or anything like that, but when somebody's trying to sound write a little bit more intelligently than they are, they start reaching for words from the thesaurus and they don't really fit in the sentence. There's a lot of that. If you enjoy that art form, you should definitely check out Left Reckoning, Sam Harris videos, comment sections, because it's a lot of these guys really, really trying to present themselves as something that they're not.
Yeah, and I mean Peterson has the same kind of following, and but he sounds unhinged no matter what. Like he can't even sound remotely rational.
Well, the funniest thing about him is it's like, oh, postmodernism is destroying, the West or whatever. And it's like the way Jordan Peterson talks about like the world is some of the most postmodernist stuff ever. You ask him if he believes in God, and he's going to talk to you for about 45 minutes about
what do you mean What do you mean believe?
About Anastasia, the Disney movie. Right? It's like that's the most postmodern shit ever.
Wasn't it Elsa that made him cry? Frozen.
Oh, yeah.
Because she didn't need a prince to rescue him.
That, or one of my favorite, and I actually think probably the most sympathetic I've ever been to Jordan Peterson is when he went to Nashville and he saw Ghost Riders, so a cover band playing Ghost Riders in the Sky, which is a bop, dude, and like I've definitely had the experience of being a honky-tonk and be like, this is a really wonderful experience. I'm very happy to be here, but never to the level of crying to Ghost Riders in the Sky. And, did they catch the? I think somebody caught there's an actual recording of that night, and I gotta say, it's not like the most. The way he describes it is a little off. It is more like somebody who probably hasn't really been out at a bar in a really long time.
David, I think my assessment of that is there might be an unseen pharmacological element at play.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Oh, and Michaela's also recently found Jesus and been posting about it a lot. So I don't know what's coming with that one. I mean, she is always a little bit religious, but like now it's like next level.
I don't get the religious stuff. Like Russell Brand, who I remember on his show, because I used to listen to it, and I'll be honest, like it hasn't aged terribly well with the way he sexualizes every goddamn guest. He very clearly has a problem, and it's kind of clear in retrospect. But he used to have a producer on a show called Nick, whose dad was a vicar, and he called him Nick the Vicar's son, and would just berate him about how God didn't exist. Now, look, people change, and maybe that was like, maybe that was Russell actually like the way that when I first heard an atheist on the news, I'm like, fuck that guy. Like, how dare you? Maybe that was Russell working through his own thing, and now this, Bear Grylls baptization that he had is sincere. But it's wild to me to go through something like that and not like take an opportunity to maybe step away from doing content. Like, hey, maybe can I enjoy this baptism with my loved ones and my personal psyche rather than having to get in front of a camera and riff on it for 15 minutes so I can put some ads on it. Like, it's so sick.
There's a part of this, I'm sorry to talk business, but like I think there's a part of this too where like indie media, right? We can call it that, right? People make money off of YouTube and podcasts. I think there is a contraction happening in that industry right now. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people getting really, really desperate and trying to pick up the most shocking things to sort of own like new listener groups. And I think things are going to get really, really weird. And the sad thing for folks who are throwing their credibility in the trash like that is I think whatever Christian bump Russell Brand is going to get is only going to last him, like a cycle.
Yeah, man. No, that's why it's good. It's polite conversations and Left Reckoning on Patreon, because David is speaking from actual experience when you look at the messages.
No, it's true. Oh my gosh. Can I tell you like how much things have changed in the past couple of years only? Because I mean, I don't know what it's like for you guys, but since Elon took over Twitter, I feel like as a podcaster, a lot of my audience has gone from Twitter, and there's no one to help, like, just engage with it. Because when you post, and then if there aren't people on Twitter to engage with it, then that post gets less listens, and then that affects everything. Yep. So it's been visibly different for me in the past couple of years. So definitely.
Yeah, and I think also like YouTube and other things throttle political content,
especially Palestine.
Yes. Exactly. And, podcasts aren't as prominent in the culture as they used to be. Podcasts through the RSS feed sort of infrastructure, I think are one of the most open forms of media. But they are very reliant on, being found through Google search results, and that stuff is terrible now.
You mean you don't like it when AI explains what it imagines this podcast is about to you?
Yeah, exactly. It just dreams something and tells me. Yeah, like being told. I'm sorry, this is a sidebar, but AI is. I was playing around with it a little bit just to, because I want to knock something. I want to know the ins and outs of it. And, it can give you a recent, chapter by chapter summary of very famous and most importantly in the public domain, Charles Dickens books, for instance, right? Because, but I have a book that's from the 1860s that isn't available online. So, AKA, the database hasn't been able to scrape it to actually look inside of it for, ChatGPT or whatever. And I asked it for chapter summaries, and it gave me decent ones for the first couple. And then I was reading to chapter 10, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. This book gets crazy. And then I actually read the book, and it had nothing to do with any of the summaries they were giving me. It was literally just making stuff up. And yeah, it's nice to have search results do that.
And imagine Israel is depending on AI systems to make lists of targets for them. So you can only imagine how accurate those are going to be.
Yeah.
I think a human
I can tell you.
United Nations.
Well, look, when you're trying to make an artificial intelligence, you have to look at what kind of intelligence you're trying to put into it. And the intelligence that Israel's putting into those AIs is, if it is a Palestinian man, that equals Hamas.
Yeah.
And so that's the advanced AI that they have running in Israel now.
Which explains a lot, right? Like the death tolls and the targeting. And I mean, I just did an episode on techno-fascism with Paris Marx of the Tech Won't Save Us podcast. It's a great podcast, very unapologetically leftist critique of tech, which I really appreciate, because there's so many fucking centrist podcasts that are saying they're leftish, but they just don't satisfy me, and it's upsetting. So it's nice to find one that is actually left-leaning and talks about tech. And just the amount of fashy tech bros, and Elon is just one of them, but how you guys were talking about the absurdity of Vivek's pearly gates stuff. As a South Asian, I'm really embarrassed by some of these brown guys recently. There's this guy called Balaji Srinivasan. He's one of these tech bros, and he wants to do tech Zionism in San Francisco and ethnically cleanse liberals and Democrats from there.
Yeah, we should actually play that on a future show. David, that is a really crazy clip.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and check out my episode on it, because I've got a bunch of really wild clips in there. He is just openly talking about it, and he really admires Israel, as an example.
Well, and that class of people, like venture capitalists, first of all, it's important to note that the opening business startup rate in this economy has been downhill since the 70s. It has not gotten better since the internet, despite all these guys, blowing smoke about the startup economy. Though venture capitalists, what those people represent as a class and why they will inevitably go fascist is because when the financial crisis hit in 2008, instead of saying, we're going to invent money and put it into the pockets of, say, underwater homeowners, for instance, we invented a whole bunch of money and gave it to bankers to try to invest with it. And that's why Silicon Valley got these large amounts of money, like the low interest rates. We talked with Danny Bester, that had a direct impact on, say, Netflix and the way that those tech companies got their foot in. And that is the same with Uber. It's the same with all the entire space of venture capital had its prominence due to the fact that we flooded the zone with cheap cash and gave it to them instead of, regular people. And what they did with it was a bunch of surveillance technology disguised as social media apps, crypto, AI, which is not really, which isn't about anything other than trying to save labor. Like the dividends by that investment, whereas China built a high-speed rail across the entire continent and actual infrastructure, things like that. We made a terrible, terrible bet, and by soaking this class of people who don't do anything but buy ideas from people who actually have them. Like the return on investment for venture capital is massively, massively small. It's not a good investment.
We gave all of our money.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
No, we just gave all of our money to like literal vampires.
Yes. and flim-flam artists. And so, Mark Zuckerberg trying to be like, well, how can I possibly justify the valuation of this stuff? I know we're going to do a bunch of weird crap. It's like they can't actually make good on that investment. We are scraping it's just wild the amount that these guys get prominence. David Sachs, right? Like the Rumble guys, Sam Altman, the OpenAI guy, is a big funder of Michael Schellenberger, right? And this is not an accident, because they're going to need, as it becomes clear to the world that the promise of the internet and technology here, it's all crypto. I mean, maybe some of it has slightly more utility than crypto, but in a sense, the sales pitch has been the most important thing this entire time. And at a certain point, people are going to get sick of it. And so you're going to need people lying about it. You're going to need to maybe do an ethnic cleansing of people saying, hey, maybe we should tax some of these things and pay for housing, as opposed to maybe relying on them doing a startup that brings down housing costs somehow through an app. Like that's just, nobody believes that anymore.
Yeah. And they're also very big into displaying the symbols of their tech fashionists, and Bitcoin symbols and things like that. Like they see that as a planting of their flag, that this is gray territory. And they want to do, this guy wants to do a gray pride parade. He calls the tech guys grays, and he wants them all to be wearing gray shirts and marching with drones in the street to celebrate their tech stuff.
You don't have numbers, bro. You will not be able to turn out a military.
You guys don't. That's true. I mean, and they're also just gobbling up, a lot of land and social space and destroying cities like San Francisco or Austin, Texas, and now Nashville. Really nasty class of people. And I wonder, I think things are going to get worse from that group of folks as the money dries up. But the interest rates aren't low.
Another example, Jason Calacanis in San Francisco was one of the big funders. He set up the GoFundMe, I believe it was Calacanis, against Chesa Boudin, the progressive prosecutor, basically blaming all the rising crime or whatever on him. And it turned out that actually, surprise, wasn't the case.
You know what was something that made me really happy, though? Just talking about DAs is here in Austin, we have a progressive DA, Jose Garza. And Austin has been a big hub for a lot of these freaks, Elon Musk famously. And all these guys, they're all worked up about crime, not real, which is amazing because, again, these guys don't walk the streets of Austin at all. But anyways, they were going nuts. Barry Weiss put out an attack against Jose Garza. Elon Musk endorsed Jose Garza's opponent. And all these tech guys are trying to pump money and attention to attack Jose Garza.
He's been speaking about Palestine, right?
Who, Garza?
Yeah.
I mean, not so much. I don't know if he said anything, of note, but it's mainly just because, he's not wanting to, he's been supportive of, certainly the students' rights to protest and things like that. But anyway, and Jose Garza's good on Palestine. I'm just saying I don't know if that was necessarily why they're getting worked up about him. But anyways, the point is that Musk and all these freaks were trying to pump money to take out the progressive DA in Austin, and they just got firmly repudiated. Willie Nelson, of course, endorsed Jose Garza, and Elon Musk endorsed his opponent. And it's very nice to remember that I still live in a city where a Willie Nelson endorsement is more important than Musk. So I wonder if how sustained those guys' political power is going to be. I think in San Francisco it's a little different because it's more concentrated. I mean, they expelled most normal people from the city.
According to Balaji, they've been ethnically cleansed from there, and that's why they must take it back.
That's so good. I feel so bad as a Texan. You have to have a rivalry with California, but I feel so bad for San Francisco because of what that, like, a very incredible American city has been through. And to hear them talk about a place like that they have to take it back, is just so disgusting. To knowing that, one, it was never theirs to begin with, and two, acting like wealthy folks who've made a bunch of money in tech aren't an incredibly powerful group of people in that city right now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. These are, I know I keep saying it, but I feel like we're in some or maybe I'm just noticing it now because of what's happening in Israel, but I feel like these times are uniquely fashy and uniquely strange. And speaking of fashy, though, but have you guys checked in on Dave Rubin recently?
Not as much as I'd like to. I'll be honest. What's he up to?
I mean, he's just completely unhinged. Do you remember the times when he would be so insistent that he is a liberal, the last liberal, and he's not right wing, and now he's just embraced it so openly that he's like putting out racist stuff, and just I'm sure you saw the one where he said to this picture of women wearing like a Palestine shirt, like Hamas wouldn't even rape you or something.
Yeah, right.
He's just so blatant now.
Yeah, I mean, he's a total asset to reactionary politics, from the DeSantis boosting to, I can't get over the fact he had the former Israeli ambassador to the United States on after October 7th, months after, and that guy's solution, he's like, you need to stop criticizing Israel and harden your border, and keep the refugees out. And it's like, no, actually, what we should have done in 1948 is just accept all the Jewish refugees into America instead of colonizing Palestine. Like that, and to hear people just sort of go on and say, actually, what you need is more investment in your repressive fascist infrastructures, like the border police. It's just, Rubin is reprehensible. But, that's why he left TYT, right? Cenk was too critical of Israel, I believe. Maybe I'm not remembering that right. But I'm sure it was because of the Sam Harris debate.
Also, he was always talking about money.
Well, yeah,
that's what Hans said. It's like he's like, wow, they can really make a lot of money on the right, Yeah,
look, it's nice getting these memberships in $5 at a time, but when you can get the giant checks in from big money guys, like that probably hits a little bit different. I don't know what that's like. It's probably really nice.
But the sad thing for guys like Rubin, and I shouldn't feel bad about him because of all the things that you just said, but it's just like I hate to say it, but you get a little older, and the weird rich perverts who want to shower money on young conservatives or classical liberals or whatever, they start becoming a little bit less interested in that and move on to the next big thing. And I think Rubin will always sort of be around to a certain extent, but I think he's going to have some trouble. And I think, one, because as he gets a little older, he's not really, as much of an asset, right? Because it's not convincing to even the weird guys anymore that like, this is a liberal who's moved on. And also there's a million of those guys, out there.
That's the problem. Is they're aging out. Like, and to be honest, this crop of the millennial generation of conservative influencers, kind of a down generation, I gotta say. But Charlie Kirk is a good example of they need the 60 to 70-year-old billionaire sugar daddy, and they become sponsored. But then you get into your mid-30s, and now all of a sudden you're expected to talk to adults and not just like troll college kids at universities. And this is a big problem. This is a big problem for a lot of people. This is a problem also for David Pakman, who still wants to act like all pro-Palestine stuff is just wacky, overly enthusiastic kids. And he'll talk to Steve Schmidt about stuff. But he could have Avi Shleiman on. He could have Ilan Papi on. he doesn't want to have any of those people on. Instead, it's just like, oh, look at these students being.
Yeah.
They requested water after they took a building over? Like, isn't that crazy what these kids are up to? That is and Tim Pool also, like, it's let's focus on kids and what these kids are doing. You can't do that so successfully once you start pushing 40, and there's gonna need to be a new crop of 20-year-old fascists who are going to take the place of all these guys. Yeah, exactly.
But David Pakman, though, even before all of this, I remember seeing like some of his IDW coverage, and like he would always exclude. He'd be like, "The IDW is so bad, but Sam Harris, he's cool." And that's just such a red flag, right? Like, and this wasn't so long ago. I'm talking like 2017, 2018. If you can't see that Sam Harris is extremely, like the other IDWers, just anti-Trump. I mean, so was Ben Shapiro. But, that's an indication of where your own politics is.
Yeah.
And that's showing itself so much nowadays, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, crazy. He had Harris on recently, didn't he? Like a couple months back.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
We were going to do something on it, and I think Matt and I both got exhausted immediately with it. But, I mean, for me, like Pakman, really first caught my eye in a negative way when the coup in Bolivia happened. Where like a popularly elected left-wing pro-indigenous government was couped by like a white nationalist far-right Christian group, with a giant Bible, with a giant goddamn Bible, saying we're going to purge the satanic like indigenous paganism from the government. And David Pakman,
witch hunt.
And David Pakman literally, the second that, and I'm sure, because this is when we were back on TMBS, I'm sure he was speaking indirectly about us on TMBS, because on TMBS, we were covering the Bolivia election and, called it immediately what this was. And David Pakman, did this kind of thing for a really long time. It's like, well, actually, some people think that the government is corrupt and blah, blah, blah. And anyways, like supported this like far right Christian coup against, again, like a popularly elected left-wing government in Bolivia. And for me, it's just like it went from beyond me just being like, oh, I'm not interested in watching this guy to being like, okay, this guy is like a problem for the left, because David Pakman, I think, embodies so like it's low-hanging fruit, I think, to focus on like the Israel stuff. Not saying that's not important, but it's like it's an orientation to politics, which is like I'm the only one. Somebody like Pakman is like, I'm the only one who's like thinking rationally about this, and the left gets carried away, and I see my job as sort of like attacking the left constantly. And by the way, I'm not going to engage with like the real figures or the thinkers behind it. I'm going to try and talk to like young people who call into my show who like don't know how to talk on a podcast with a large audience about these kind of subjects, right? It's really childish stuff, and I find it to be really I find it to be really problematic for left-wing movements to have figures like this who are treated as if they're on our side, because they're not.
No, you're exactly, and I just want to underline what you said about like the not engaging, because that Bolivia thing, again, it was the look at the crazy lefties, the often younger than me, that they just don't understand the world and how to think through things logically.
Yes.
The Center for Economic Policy Research is not just like some extreme left-wing outlet, and they were doing stuff on that coup immediately upon it. And Pakman, it is a huge problem to present yourself as some sort of leading exponent of these movements and to act as if organizations like that don't exist, or the Israeli Committee Against Housing Demolitions don't exist, and to think that this is all some sort of infantile disorder, right? Like, as opposed to, no, actually you're behind, and your audience is being infantilized by your inability to engage with adults on these topics. And that is fundamentally where the Pakman audience is. They are infantilized babies.
That is very cathartic to hear, because I mean there's a lot of these centristy kind of podcast bros too that I am perpetually frustrated with, and covering the IDW, it's so insidious that I feel like if there are people that cover it laundering sort of way, it's a big problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't want to take up too much more of your time. The last thing I just wanted to touch on before you go is, do you think that the left and like the more centristy part of the left, the liberals, the establishment Democrats, should be cooperating on things, especially as we get closer to the election that I'm dreading? It's not even my country, but I'm terrified. And if you think that there should be cooperation and unification, what kinds of things should we be cooperating on? And
I mean, the thing that looms is just the Gaza stuff, because if it wasn't for that, Biden would have, I think, plenty to run on for re-election.
Yeah.
I have lots of criticisms with the way he kneecapped his agenda in service of a lot of those centrists, like the infrastructure stuff and Build Back Better and student loan stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is he was supporting the UAW, got the UAW endorsements, and Trump is a complete monster.
Yeah.
As it stands now, it's like there has to be movement on that. Otherwise, it's just too hard to affirmatively support the guy. Mm-hmm. When literally Anthony Blinken is saying, "We'll starve y'all if you if you do the thing that we say we want, which is a two-state solution.
Right.
We will starve the entire world about it." It's tough to think about. Like, ultimately, they've done enough. I think, from what I was expecting of Biden, is like, okay, withdraw from Afghanistan, and support labor. I mean, they should have done the PRO Act too. Again, a lot of these things they've again like kneecapped themselves. But I don't expect much from that. But it's tough to tout the withdrawal from Afghanistan when they are going into support. It looks like a permanent occupation of Gaza, or reoccupation of Gaza. So it's tough. It's tough to, I would say like the things that they had already done would have been good enough to just affirmatively say, yeah, Biden is who you should go pull the lever for. And now it's like the vote based on coalitions, but if you have tough time voting for somebody who's saying we'll starve the world if you recognize Palestine, I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it sort of depends on what we mean by cooperate, because I think I can't imagine, like, for example, like the left, not supporting, a move from the centrist wing of the Democratic Party to, let's say, like codify like Roe v. Wade, right? Which is something that they just don't do, right? It's like, on all these issues, I don't think that there's like hesitation from like the left to cooperate on these kind of things. When what the reality is that the Democratic Party is, I think, extremely hostile to even a lot of the values that they espouse. I mean, just to zoom in on one thing, I don't know if you caught this up in Canada, but there's this guy, Henry Cuellar, right, who is the most conservative Democrat in the House. And he is anti-abortion in an election year, in the past few election cycles, where that was supposed to be like the major issue, right? Mm-hmm. But what happens when he has a progressive Democratic challenger? The entire party goes to the mat for this guy, who, by the way, if you haven't been following or didn't know, is now the FBI has charged him with corruption because he's been taking bags of money from Azerbaijan, right? And by the way, they knew that back in this old election cycle because you had Nancy Pelosi saying this wasn't a big deal or wasn't a serious thing, right? And they sent the bigwigs down to South Texas to campaign against Justice Cisneros, and the election. I mean, it was hundreds of votes in this primary. That was the difference between Cuellar getting unseated or whatnot, right? And that's like the way that party is sort of orienting themselves to the left. And like these are serious issues. Like abortion is not a small thing, right? And I just I'm all for like friendship and figuring things out together. But the fact is that like even on these issues that like you're supposed to like there shouldn't be a big division on this. There is because this party and that leadership I think is very committed to keeping their people in power, because I think that there's like motivations outside of just like these kind of direct things of standing up for democracy or for women's rights and all that stuff. And as bad. I mean, so like the Gaza stuff, I think paints over all of this kind of thing. But even on those issues, it's I can't imagine that it's going to get any better in the next few years.
Oh yeah, they're coming after like birth control. It feels like,
Yeah.
That's what.
Well, speaking of Dave Rubin, they're literally going after in vitro fertilization, and he's still talking.
Yes.
I can't even.
Which is wild. Did you see? Ted Cruz is trying to defend that in vitro fertilization, which is just like an interesting thing. But well, it's because I don't know about the rest of the country. It's because in Texas, a woman had their eggs frozen, and in a divorce, the husband is trying to get them, which is such a nasty thing to think.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And her lawyers are basically arguing that the Texas abortion ban includes that. So that's like the legal challenge here on that topic. Well, it's horrifying stuff.
That is horrifying.
And this is the thing this is why I get really mad. People sometimes are like, David, you always talk about the Democrats, you live in Texas and all this kind of stuff. It's like, I'm horrified by the Republicans and what they're up to. What frustrates me is that I live in a place where like people are horrified by what the Republicans are doing. And yet, there is like no serious opposition. And it's not because Texas is quote unquote such a red state. It's because like Colin Allred, who's running for senator to challenge Ted Cruz, is signing letters with the rest of the Republican Party saying that they oppose Joe Biden's quote open border policies, right? And is like doing all this kind of super right wing stuff. That's not an opposition to somebody like Cruz, right? Because I'm sorry, if you are a lunatic who wants to see people brutalized at the border, do you want the big show or like the little show?
Exactly. That they're never going to win like that. They always try to get that side, but they never go fash enough, so they end up losing their own support and the support from the right, who go for the real deal, not the diet fash.
Yeah, and it's dangerous because then you have decades of right wing rule in a place like this, and you have all these horrifying consequences of it. And I think that something that Matt and I talk about on the program a lot is that one of the things that's very clear about the Democratic Party is the Republicans very much like to suppress democracy. That's why they push like voting ID laws and make it more difficult to vote, all this kind of stuff. Hell, the Texas Republican Party is having their convention right now, and they're trying to make it so you have to re-register to vote every single year, which is just a nightmare to think about, just the bureaucracy involved with that.
Right.
So yes, the Republicans are wanting to suppress democracy, but Democrats want to manage democracy. And, you look at a Democratic Party machine like New York just to see how that goes. They don't want to, for example, like have high turnout primary elections in New York where effectively the Democratic Party is like the final election, right? They like to have like their kind of controlled voters. And they find this is why Bernie Sanders was so threatening to them. That's why a lot of these kind of left populist, candidates are such a threat to them, because the idea of like the quote mob, right, or the everyday folks like really getting involved in politics, is very frightening to like Schumer and Pelosi and all of these folks. And like those are tendencies that I think if we want to have a better future, we have to just defeat those folks politically. And I think, to be able to defeat them means you have to be able to be serious about criticizing them and to recognize that these are actually like political opponents to people who want things like, Medicare for all, higher wages for workers, and figure out ways to sort of confront them while also actually like building a real kind of political base and not just sort of spending your entire life in critique, right? Which is something that happens with the left a lot. It's like we sort of sit out politics, but we're right, and that's not going to work either. So it's a difficult game, as Marxists like to say. It's dialectics. All
right. Well, thank you both so much. It was such a pleasure chatting with you guys. And do you have anything
seriously
you want to plug at the end? Or I'll link your show and everything.
Yeah, give us a follow over at Left Reckoning on YouTube or on your podcast device.
Yes, and I can't fully announce it yet, but as a little, treat for folks, a bunch of really wonderful journalists and activists right here in the state of Texas are working on launching a major left-wing magazine which will cover politics in this state. So follow me on Twitter at David Griscom or at Left Reckoning to maybe see that announcement when it comes out, but hopefully it will be announced very, very soon.
Well, that's very exciting. Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. And have a great rest of your day.
Seriously, thank you.
And if you ever want to chat about the IDW, let me know.
Let's definitely do it again.
Maybe we should do another ID. Yeah, I'd like to get into. I mean, I'm glad you asked about Rubin. I'm very interested with the Daily Wire stuff too, so we'll have to revisit.
All right, awesome.
All right, well, y'all take care.
See you guys.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support it, there are several ways you can do that. You can share it online, talk about what you just heard. You can leave a 5-star review to help others find it too. And you can also subscribe via patreon.com/nice mangoes. No E in mangoes. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter before it's completely wrecked, you'll find me at Nice Mangoes. Again, no E in mangoes.